Hello everyone, back to today's first video. Going to do JMA Friday for today's first video. So you're having a month ahead look ahead with the Japanese and CFS B2 models, and this is going to take us into June. So we'll kind of like go into second week of June with this update. So of course we have a very warm start to May. It's turned cooler now, and it's beginning to turn a little bit more unsettled as well. We'll see whether there's any signs in the long range output of going back to high pressure, warmer and drier weather in the next sort of 4 weeks. So last week's JMA Friday was a bit of a classic. Both the Japanese and CFS models were indicating a lot of high pressure for the second half of May and potentially some very warm weather at times as well. So we'll see whether they've still got that trend amongst these two long range models for today's first video. Just say that today's second video coming up this afternoon, we'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days in detail. But we'll get on with the month-ahead look ahead now. So we begin with the JMA. These are the 500 millibar height anomalies broken down into weekly periods. The first weekly period will take us from the 11th, from today, through to the 18th of May. This is the North Pole view down. So we've got the North Pole of the Northern Hemisphere just there, and then the mid-latitudes of Northern Hemisphere are around there. Blue extrapolates to below average heights, which is low pressure, and yellow, orange and red extrapolating to above average heights, which is high pressure. So this 500 millibar height anomaly for this coming week, and we find it looks rather unsettled, really. We've got above average heights sitting to our northeast, and also a ridge through the central Atlantic from the Azores. And then we've got below average heights to our west and northwest, and that brings the jet stream through the country rather like that. So it does look a bit changed, but it does look a bit unsettled. Does look a little bit cooler as well in the week ahead. We was always likely to get this more unsettled phase of weather through the middle part of May. So we've got it. It is cooler. It's going to turn a little bit more unsettled as well. The question is, how quickly will we get back to high pressure if we do? Let's see what the week 2 500 millibar height anomaly looks like. And it's that the 18th through to the 25th finds that, again, we have above average heights building to our east-northeast, so quite a strong ridge in over Scandinavia. Below average heights being pushed back into the Atlantic. And so we do something a bit like that with the flow with the jet stream. So that looks like a warmer and drier scenario. The wind is going into the east or the southeast. So I would assume that's a fairly warmish week coming up there. We do have below average heights in the Atlantic. We also have below average heights to our south. So there is possibly some rain threatening. I don't think it's quite as warm and dry as we were seeing in last week's JMA Friday, but nevertheless, still the idea that above average heights will be in control through that particular week. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4. Takes us from the 25th of May through to the 8th of June, with above average heights then centering over and just a little bit to the north of the country. Below average heights is still in the Atlantic and up to the northeast. You will think we're pulling in a bit of an east-southeasterly flow there, so that should be relatively warm and possibly quite dry as well. Bear in mind, this is a 2-weekly anomaly. Weeks 3 and 4, so it might be transitional. It might be that week 3 is similar to week 2 with a lot of high pressure in control, and then maybe something more unsettled in week 4. You can never rule that kind of scenario out for a 2-weekly anomaly, but overall I reckon that should be reasonably dry, particularly for the north, and potentially fairly warm as well. Let's have a look at the mid-latitude and tropical view in terms of the temperature and precipitation anomalies that go with those heights. So on this view, the British Isles is in the top right-hand corner of the chart. As you're looking at it, Europe is over here, and then the North Pole, the northern latitudes, kind of like up there off the chart. But of course, we don't need to see that because we just had a look at that particular view. So, reminder of the week 1 500 millibar height anomaly with the above average heights through the central Atlantic, below average heights out to the northwest. We know we've got a big ridge, we can't see it, but we've got a big ridge sitting to our northeast as well in the week ahead. So, the precipitation anomaly looks like that, and it's relatively dry, despite the fact it's still quite an unsettled looking 500 millibar height anomaly. Overall precipitation anomalies are coming out drier than average. Temperature anomalies are a bit disappointing, though. So for the western part of the country, it's actually a bit colder than average. In the north and northeast, it is a little bit milder than average. Much of Central Europe looking quite cool as well. So overall, a relatively sort of coolish week coming up to start us off. Then we go through to week 2, the 18th to 25th of May. Finds that we build this area of above average heights into the country from the east and the northeast. We've got below average heights to the west and to the south, so it might not be entirely plain sailing. However, the temperature and precipitation is looking like this. Precipitation is coming out, so that's coming out drier than average again from the 18th to the 25th of May. What about the temperature anomaly? And it's close to, or probably a little bit above average through most parts of the country. Much of Europe is turning warmer than average as well. So that does look like a warmer week there from the 18th to the 25th of May. And then finally, we go through to weeks 3 and 4 with an area of above average height setting up to our north, over and to the north of the country, essentially. Look like we're probably bringing in quite a lot of sort of easterly type influences with the wind. The temperature anomaly remains close to or a little bit warmer than average. I don't think these temperature anomalies are as warm as the anomalies we were seeing with this model last week. So I think it has scaled back the warm temperature potential, but nevertheless still coming out a little bit on the warmer than average side for the end of May, the start of June. And precipitation still looks relatively dry as well. So overall quite a quiet sort of month coming up with fairly dry and reasonably warm weather on the way. That's a signal from the JMA this morning. What about CFS V2? Well, again, these are 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. The first weekly period will take us from the 11th through to the 17th of May with below average heights to the north and northwest of the country, so running through rather like that. Above average heights in the central Atlantic around the Azores and also to our northeast. So perfect agreement really for the pattern in the week ahead between these two models. It means that it is rather cooler and more changeable with the flow and the jet stream going something rather like that. Albeit it's not a washout of a week, but it is a little bit more unsettled and cooler compared to what we're used to. But then, very similar to what JMA is showing for week 2. This is the 18th through to the 24th of May, with above average heights then extending in from the east and the northeast. It pushes this below average height area out towards Greenland, but also to our south. So again, you would expect we're bringing in quite a lot of easterly winds there. Possibly also some quite warm sort of southeasterly winds as well. So that does look like a warmer and drier week there from the 18th to the 24th of May. And then the CFS wants to keep that ridge going through to the end of May. So this is for the week from the 25th through to the 31st of May. Week 3 has above average heights extending through the country again from the northeast. So once more we'll see a lot of dry and potentially very warm weather coming through with that. It looks like a warmer scenario that compared to what the JMA is showing. However, we go through to week 4 and this is a change. This is the 1st through to the 7th of June. The first week of June then has above average heights close to Greenland, also still to the northeast. So I assume essentially we've got a big sort of blocking feature going on up there. And then below average heights are down to the south, to the southwest. That could bring thunder, potentially, and then perhaps something quite a lot cooler as well. It does look more unsettled. It's a long way off. It's week 4, but it looks more unsettled as we go through to the early part of June. Temperature anomalies in the weekend looking like bad, and we are coming out a little bit cooler than average, so both of these models are agreeing that the week ahead, the 11th to the 17th of May, will be a cooler and rather more unsettled week as well. However, we go through to week 2, 18th to the 24th of May, and then we're going significantly warmer than average, not just the UK, but for much of Europe as well. So a much warmer week coming up there from the 18th to 24th of May. Then we go through to week 3. That also is coming out significantly warmer than average through much of northern, central and western Europe. But then we go through to week 4, the first week of June, 1st to the 7th of June, does look cooler. So it's going back to average, but obviously that's a cooling off compared to what happens in weeks 2 and weeks 3 as well. Finally, precipitation. So the coming week, in terms of the precipitation anomaly, is actually still a little bit on the dry side. So although the pattern is rather more unsettled in terms of the 500 millibar height anomaly, and it is cooler as well, both of these models are agreeing it's not going to be an overly unsettled week by any means, and in fact we might still come out on the drier than average side for the weekend, particularly in the south. Then week 2, which is the 18th 24th of May, that's coming out drier than average as well. Week 3 also looking drier than average, so this is looking like still there's a good trend here for a really quite a dry second half to May, and relatively warm as well. It maybe has scaled it back a little bit from last week's very classic hot and dry JMA Friday, but nevertheless the signals are still broadly the same as they were last week, which is for a lot of dry and relatively warm weather to come in the second half of May. We go through to week 4 with precipitation finally of CFS V2. This is the first week of June, and it's close to average, but it looks like, if anything, it's probably hinting at going a little bit more unsettled there. So question marks early June, but until then, it looks as though we've got quite a lot of dry and warm weather to come through the second half of May. So, as I say, it looks like the CFS and the JMA has scaled things back a little bit from last week. Maybe not going quite as warm and dry as we saw in last week's JMA Friday, but nevertheless, the signal is still broadly the same, which is after this cooler, slightly more unsettled interruption, although both models are agreeing it's still pretty dry in the week ahead, but it is a bit cooler. It is a little bit more unsettled in the week ahead, but after that, both models are broadly in agreement that the second half of May is still looking quite good. Then possibly, it's a long way off, possibly a deterioration to something more unsettled by the early part of June. But that really is a very, very long way off indeed. And it's in the most unreliable part of all of this. So no concerns about that at this stage. Right, so that's this week's JMA Friday done. Don't forget, this is all highly experimental. It's not to be relied upon at all. These charts and models are prone to chopping and changing. Today's second video update will have a look at the weather for the next 7 to 10 days in the more reliable time frame. So come back for that later on this afternoon. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.